Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a very delayed Ukraine war news update. First part thereof for the 9th of April 2025. Apologies that it has taken a long time for me to get this together. I've been out for the day. Alas, here it is for you. We have the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find them in the description, linked in the description to the video below. 1,270 personnel lost is a pretty significant number still, just below the 1,300 mark at the moment. And that's probably reflected, that tiny drop there, reflected in, or at least in correlation with 4 tanks being lost, which is definitely below average, and 10 troop carrying airfields, about half the daily average. So, it looks like there's a bit of a downturn in some of these figures, but we are hearing from some sources that the intensity is actually upped on the battlefield at the moment, or across the front line at the moment. We have 52 artillery systems, which is a significant number. That's almost 3 times the daily average. So that's a pretty decent number. And we move on to 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. That's quite significant. And well, it's not a significant number, but just to have anything on there is good news for Ukrainians. We have 118 vehicles and fuel tanks lost. So that's pretty high, and also good news for the Ukrainians. Um, yeah, I guess those figures are, all right for the Ukrainians. I mean, artillery system still 52 there. That's a pretty decent number. Now, although I don't have an Andrew perpetual loss list, there are some interesting videos coming out. There's quite a few over the last few days. Ukraine's air force has struck the command post of Russia's 81st self-propelled artillery regiment in Kherson region. As a result, 20 to 30 Russians were reportedly eliminated. Final losses still being assessed. So that's another significant hit on troop accumulations, command posts. The Ukrainians really are doing, I think, a concerted effort at striking with. Well, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. There seems to be more footage of these guided glide bomb strikes, air aviation strikes from the Ukrainians than we've seen previously, and along with that, they are going to be taking some losses. The Russians here, we have Ukraine announces a significant strike in on Russia in the Kursk region, claiming over 30 enemy infantry there were killed and much equipment destroyed. But so far, there is no proof. This is coming from the Ukrainian general staff, and just to see uh, what the claim is. On April the 7th, 2025, the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine struck a warehouse complex that was actively used by the armed forces of the Russian Federation in Kursk. There seems to be a little bit of an internet issue. So I'll see if I can, if the rest of that can render. Give me 2 ticks. It's better if I read it from here. So, the strike destroyed hangars, several military buildings, and technical equipment. More than 30 occupiers, including drone crews and repairmen, were eliminated. So, some good detail there, but that is the general staff just claiming that. But the general staff do seem to be pretty, um, as we've been looking at over the last 3 years, pretty reliable, I think, as a source. Now, Zelensky reveals details on captured Chinese soldiers. Ukrainian forces fought 6 Chinese military personnel in Donetsk near Tarasivka and Bilorivka. 2 were taken prisoner. This is causing quite a bit of consternation, because some are claiming that this is evidence that the Chinese are really helping the Ukrainians. I think it's more likely this is evidence that there are mercenaries from China working for the Russians, in the same way that there have been many people from India, Nepal, Cuba, Cape Verde, all the places in Africa, all sorts. And so I don't know that this is reflecting anything more severe in terms of the aid that China is giving Russia. But then I can't, that's just my speculation. I can't know that for sure. Chinese citizens are already fighting for Russia. Ukrainian forces captured 2 Chinese nationals serving, etc., etc., etc. Zelensky says we have information that there are significantly more Chinese citizens in enemy units we are investigating. So it could be something more serious than just the odd mercenary fighting on behalf of the Russians, and this has led to the U.S. State Department making a making some statements. So Tammy Bruce, the spokesperson for the Department of State, says China is a major enabler of Russia in a war. China provides nearly 80% of the dual-use items Russia needs to sustain a war. The USA is aware that Ukraine has captured 2 Chinese soldiers fighting on Russia's side, saying it's, quote, disturbing. She confirmed that the attack on Kryvyi Rih the other day was by the means of a Russian ballistic missile in a residential neighborhood, so that's good admission, and confirmed that Trump is committed to finding and demanding the return of stolen Ukrainian children. So actually, there could be a reality where Chinese mercenaries being seen as more of a problem for Ukraine, being a serious problem for Ukraine, might work in Ukraine's favor, because at the moment China are kind of enemy number one again. It's taken a bit of time, but this trade war, just the insanity of the Trump tariffs, have thrown up all sorts of different dynamics, and one of them is that it looked like China was getting let off the hook for some time, even though the new administration is supposed to be China hawks. And then suddenly, with the retaliation of China and then retaliation the US, and 104% tariffs on Chinese goods and whatnot, we are back to the US being very formal in China being the bad guys, right? And at least economically speaking. But then if you get a connection of China to Russia, then it can start, guilt by association or guilt by help or whatever, however you want to lay this thing out. China helping Russia, then it makes it easier for Americans to see Russia as the bad guys again, as they should do. And maybe the Trump administration are forced to then help Ukraine more because China is helping Russia more overtly. So some fascinating dynamics could come out of this. Now, a representative of the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs has said China did not send its military personnel to participate in the war in Ukraine. But of course, these yeah, Chinese mercenaries, I don't think, like I said earlier, were sent by the state. But this kind of rhetoric, well, there's not rhetoric, this kind of PR, if you like, might help Ukraine in the long run with regard to US support. Now, the latest video from Robert Magyar, the guy who's in charge of Magyar's birds, he's got very interesting commentary, the number of inflicted losses and the change of target priority. He now reports and gives supporting evidence from units. Um, well, so sorry, the commentary is on how reports and supporting evidence from units is now centrally analysed, and those units rewarded with extra drones based on the independent analysis of the result. So we already knew that the general staff looks at the video. Well, we don't know the way we understand it, or the way I understand it, is each unit provides evidence, video evidence for what they've done in terms of material they've destroyed, personnel they've killed, etc., etc., and that then gets totted up in the Ukrainian general staff figures on a daily that we look at on a daily basis. And these numbers aren't just plucked out of posteriors; they are evidence-driven numbers um, that require their units to kind of get off their backsides and supply this to the general staff. Now, the general staff, it then appears, according to at least Magyar here, are potentially rewarding great success with more drones. So if you guys do well, you get more kit. This, you would think, drives up, gives extra motivation for driving up performance, and there's a positive cycle there. Uh, and yeah, we, I think, would dearly love to know the finer details of how these figures are compiled. But interesting that there's a reward system put in place, according to Magyar, with regard to successful hits that are proven by video evidence. Here we have some more video evidence. I'm going to pause it because I get in trouble. Russian forces launched another reckless assault on the positions of the Ukrainian 72nd Mechanized Brigade and paid a heavy price. On April the 6th alone, they lost 5 tanks, 3 BMPs, 6 vehicles, and 53 infantry. The Balava drone battalion played a key role in the operation. Now we would understand, well, actually, they've repelled the attacks. They've done a really good job, and they're going to get rewarded for doing a good job with getting more drones from centrally. As I say, there's quite a bit of footage coming out at the moment concerning all the different sort of strikes and repelled attacks and losses. So you can go and find them all out at your leisure. We're going to move on to strikes, and the Ukrainian Air Force shot down. Well, there were 55 drones that were sent into Ukrainian airspace. They shot down 32. 8 were taken out by electronic warfare. So that's actually not great interception rates. That's 15 out of 55 getting through, which is kind of typical for what we've seen over the last week or two. I think that's deeply worrying. That's a deeply worrying percentage for Ukraine. The good news here is only 55 drones. Yet again, another night of low drone usage. You would if you could, you aren't, so you can't. And I maintain at the moment that, yeah, they might be stockpiling. It means they can't do 200 a night and stockpile for a massive hit, or they're stockpiling for a massive hit. But, when you were having 200 drones previously, right, what is a massive hit more than that? I mean, would they be stockpiling for 500? That means they can't do 200 a night and stockpile for 500. So they aren't, so they can't, is they aren't releasing 200 a night at the moment. Either they're waiting for just to be able to stockpile for a massive, massive attack, or their construction facilities have been hit, or their depots have been hit. Like, I, I think this is. I would speculate that, yeah, again, I'm saying the same thing I said last couple of days, that the Russian manufacturing facilities probably have been hit, and or depots, and that's good news for Ukrainians. But the 15 drones getting through when they had larger warheads than they previously did is a problem. So we had issues in Kharkiv again, industrial zones there, 10 hits on Kharkiv, no news of injuries, said uh, Tim White yesterday. Explosion in Dnipro, again in Dnipro there, multiple fires in the city after Russia's swarm drone attack, possibly 15 strikes on Kharkiv. Here, one fire, fairly significant fire can be seen in the background there. 6 people injured in Dnipro, one seriously. That was earlier yesterday. Quite a few uh, or at least last night. So that this is what was going on, because it's quite late for me now to do this video. This was as it was happening in evening time, my time, which would have been later in the night, Ukrainian time. And yeah, it was all about Dnipro, Kharkiv, but also Kramatorsk. So something big seems to have exploded in and around Kramatorsk. But yeah, definitely issues in Dnipro. Um, I don't know that we've got. Yeah, again, Tim White's got really substantial thread on this last night. Um, an apartment block was partially destroyed in Kramatorsk, so that looks like that big explosion hit there. Um, yeah, and then we get on to so that was Kharkiv actually. Some pretty big fires going on somewhere there. Dnipro again, um, and yeah, then we get on to the Ukrainian strike. So the Ukrainians sent a heck of a lot of drones into Russia last night. Massive drone attack hit the Russians. 158 were sent. They targeted multiple regions, including Mozdok Air Base, home to the Russian bombers. Drones were spotted in Kuban, Rostov, Saratov, and even Oriol. Damage assessment is still ongoing. And obviously, that was some time ago. But like I keep saying, it's very difficult to know what has been hit, what has been even targeted in Russia on a nightly basis. We just don't get enough information out, and I think an awful lot more is being accomplished by the Ukrainians than we know, and probably by a considerable margin. I know it sounds hopeful, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Now, Rostov, videos catching subsequent explosions there. I won't play them to you. Tikhoretsk, which was where, if you remember, one of the two massive ammo depots went up big time. That had some explosions as well. And Napa, which is Crimea way. So a whole range of places being struck. Um, Ukraine seems to be responding with a big drone attack tonight, said Tim White last night. Video from Primorsko-Akhtarsk on the Krasnodar coast, where there's an air base at the town. Big explosion caught on camera there. Ukrainian drones have also reached Engels and the city of Saratov region with a famous airbase there. At least 5 explosions reported by Russian media, 3 captured in this recording, and similar soundtrack here on this video with subsequent, consecutive explosions, but filmed in Rostov there. So quite a few places hopefully hit. Mozdok military airfield being mentioned in a few places. According to Russian media, there was a massive drone attack on Russia with 158 drones in 12 regions, as I said. And what else do we know? So also Orenburg 2 military airbase was supposedly targeted, and that's according to the governor of the Orenburg region in Russia. Ukrainian drones attacked there, but he did claim that there was no damage, but you can never trust those claims. So I think there could have been significant damage last night, but we'll have to wait and see. Russia stated at a UN meeting that Ukraine is trying to pass off a strike on military facilities as an attack on civilian infrastructure. Nebenzia commented on the strike in Kryvyi Rih, the one where the Russians claim they hit a NATO meeting in a restaurant, and actually apartment blocks were hit by cluster munitions, and it was pretty horrific. He also accused Kiev of continuing to shell Russian energy infrastructure, so the old kind of projection and denial, etc., etc. And then good news. So Syrskyi, the commander-in-chief, has claimed that a few days ago, our successful actions destroyed a long-range bomber, a Tu-22M3, just as it landed. Our drone hit it, and the cost is about $100 million for one of those. So that is another Tu-22M3. So there was one that was taken out previously. It wasn't taken out; it crashed, didn't it, in Irkutsk? So losing another one in quick succession is really good news. This one being hit just after it landed by a drone. Fantastic news for the Ukrainians there. Russia has effectively, so on to other bits and pieces, has effectively launched an offensive, is a claim from Syrskyi, on Sumy and Kharkiv regions. So this is the kind of counterattack from the Kursk Oblast back down into Sumy seems to have become a major offensive for the Russians. This was stated by the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Syrskyi. According to him, over the past week, the Russians have almost doubled their offensives on all major directions of the front. And then there are other general claims. This is in the Kyiv Independent. The Russian offensive operations have reportedly intensified across Ukraine's front lines. Uh, that's that is CNN reporting that today, citing Ukraine's general staff and soldiers. So it does seem to have heated up, possibly an awful lot on the northern border. And that is a real worrying situation. I think that counter attack from the Russians is really causing the Ukrainians something to think about. Now, Russia's facing a potential budget crisis as the price of oil plummets on trade war fears. Russia's central bank warned Tuesday that falling global oil prices could strain the country's public finances, with oil revenues falling 10% year on year in the first quarter. I mean, just look at that image. That should tell you everything you need to know. What else do we have? Moscow Times here reporting that trade wars, quote, usually lead to declining global trade and perhaps falling demand for our energy resources. Central Bank Chief Nabiullina told Russian lawmakers, quote, the risks are there. We always prepare for such risks. Russia's oil revenues fell 10% year on year in the first quarter to $31 billion. Finance Ministry said Tuesday, warning of further declines, quote, due to the weakening price environment. Ukraine, which has long criticized countries that continue to buy Russian energy, said Monday it hoped the price drop would squeeze the Kremlin's war budget. Quote, the lower the oil prices, the less money Russians will have to fund their war, said Andriy Yermak, chief of staff to Ukrainian president, on social media. So this could be very good news for the Ukrainians. We talked about that previously. Crude oil flows from all Russian ports in 4 weeks to April the 6th fell to 3.23 million barrels a day, their lowest in a month, and about 220,000 barrels a day below their recent peak, according to Bloomberg. And that's Russia's crude oil shipments slipped to their lowest in a month, says Bloomberg. So, again, good news for the Ukrainians there. Bad news for the Russians. Ukrainian steelmaker has received its first batch of US coking coal after Pokrovsk mine halt. So if you remember, there's a coking mine in Pokrovsk that had to stop its activities due to the encroaching front line and the obviously the challenge of lots of lead flying through the air and going bang in and around Pokros. So they closed that mine, and that's really affected the ability to make steel in Ukraine. So US supplies have then started reaching Ukraine. They're meant to offset the loss of the coking coal from the mine near Pokros, which has suspended operations as Russian forces are closing in on the Donetsk Oblast town. Obviously need to do a frontline update at some point pretty darned soon. Kaja Kallas has said it takes two to want peace, but it only takes one to want war. It is clear that Russia wants war. What is clear is that China is a key enabler of Russia's war. Without Chinese support, Russia wouldn't be able to wage the war to the amount that they are waging. And I think that's really good to hear from someone as prominent as Kallas, which is to say, China are an issue here. It's a delicate balance, my opinion, totally my opinion here. But the more you attack China for helping Russia, the more they are likely to entrench and go, okay, then we'll really help them. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a subtle game you've got to play, which is to chide them, pressure them. But if you go over the top in really attacking China, then they will just entrench more and really start supplying Russia, and then we are in a much worse kind of world war situation. But you do want to put enough pressure on them to change their uh, their behavior, and that's why those secondary uh, sanctions were really, really important for the US Treasury to do. So it's not like chiding them in public, but actually saying, if you start saying to these banks directly, if you're going to start doing business on behalf of these Russian oil movements, then we're going to sanction you, type thing. And that I think is something that should be really leaned into. I think the economic approach, not the trade war craziness that we're seeing, but some of the activities of the U.S. Treasury need to be ramped up. They were, I think, having a good effect prior to January the 20th. Well, the effects actually came somewhat later for the things put in right at the end of the Biden tenure. Now, Zelensky said, I understand that we are a strong country, but we cannot fight multiple countries at once, each wanting something from our land. And of course, what he's talking about here while speaking with the Belgian prime minister is the US. It's like, yeah, we're a strong country, but if US is trying to extort us and Russia's trying to extort us and invade us, we're strong, but we can't. This is impossible. And then you add China into the mix, and it's really difficult for Ukraine. You've got to feel sorry for them, of course, and that's what we're here for. But just it's so frustrating at the moment. I'm actually going to move the Belgian Prime Minister forward here. So he was over yesterday in Kiev, and he was shown, obviously, they often show leaders stuff about Butcher, the photographs, getting them to interview with people, talk to people who experienced some horrific stuff there, just to allow it to hit home. He said it's really hard looking at these photos. It really is. So he was famously, he was in tears, right? Which was quite an affecting sight, isn't it? To have a world leader sort of really emotionally struck by that which has happened in Ukraine. The good news there is that with that emotional effect, and that's the idea of these um, these moments, isn't it, from a Ukrainian point of view, then you get a resolve, who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, and then a resolve to do something about it. So the Prime Minister of Belgium, Bart de Wever, could not hold back his tears after seeing photos of Russian atrocities in Bucha and shared his personal story. Quote, I have quite a special bond with this country, with Ukraine. My father was a regular visitor. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, he traveled the country by train, made numerous friends, and they also visited us in Belgium to do odd jobs to earn a little cash. So that's good news from that point of view. Now, interesting divergence here of narratives or advice or what's going on. Propagandists here talking about the American about the Trump administration, saying, "Meanwhile, in Russia, this is Julia Davis from Russian media monitor, pundits have rejoiced about Ovechkin's record and Kash Patel talking on Russian state TV. I've not been aware of this, but if the FBI leader Kash Patel has spoken on Russian state TV, then that, honestly, Kash Patel, I mean, the Americans are so freaking compromised, the Trump administration. But the State Duma member, Leonid Kalashnikov, has said everyone in Russia should support Trump and he should remain in power in the US for as long as possible. Now, that doesn't tell you really what these guys think and where they are at with regard to the Trump administration, and I don't know what will. Absolutely incredible. On the other hand, you have this from Steve Rosenberg looking through the Russian newspapers this morning. A Russian paper says Donald Trump is, quote, conducting affairs chaotically and throwing, quote, pieces of complex jigsaw puzzles into the air in the hope that they will come down. When they come down, they'll form a more sensible picture, not at will. I think that's such a great metaphor. Like throwing this all up in the air, falls on the floor and go, right, so what we're trying to do is this, rather than, having the ideas first and the rationale first and then actions to follow. Another paper predicts that on Iran, Trump risks another failure. Uh, yeah. So they kind of love him because they realize he's being very good for Russia and he's got a lot of pro-Russian people in that cabinet and surrounding him. Goodness me, I saw some stuff David Sachs was saying over the last 24, 48 hours, and it's just horrific and anti-Ukraine, pro-Russian stuff. Um, so there's a lot of people adjacent to the Trump administration, as well as in the Trump administration, who I think are compromised and the Russians love, including, I think, Trump himself. But also they understand that his foreign policy vis-a-vis kind of trade tariffs and trade wars and throwing tariffs on everyone apart from Russia is chaotic and lacking in coherent, I think, policy. But anyway, that's enough for me. Hopefully that was of use. Sorry, it is a particularly late one today, but there you go. Make of it what you will. Have at it in the comments and let me know what you think. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.